Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Oh, good morning, Mike.
How you doing? What's going on in the world of Tommy? We're ramping down the end of school year. We're getting closer to summer. Is that the beginning of the time of year for you where the kids are getting all antsy and trying to get out of school?
Oh yeah. What's the topic today, by the way, before we dive in?
Yeah, before we jump into things, let's just jump into our topic today. Our main topic for today is just going to unpack what TMDL is. And then that's TMDL, and VS Code. What are these tools? How would we use them? And how should we be thinking about these tools as part of our development cycle? You know, where are Tommy and I using them? Where are we finding value from them? What are maybe tips or tricks that we're using with these tools today currently? And we'll kind of unpack that as well. Also, community, if you're listening on either X or YouTube, we'd love to have your opinion as well. Let us know what you're thinking about these tools and how are you using them as well. That being said, let's jump into the news. Tommy, let's do some news items today.
Yeah. So before we get into some news, Mike, my mouse died, and I'm very, very particular about the tools that I use physically, not just the software, but I like my keyboard. I have a Ducky keyboard. It lights up, but it's more the mechanical keyboard. But I have this old mouse from my old job that I just loved. It died on me a week and a half ago. Very frustrating. So I scoured the web, Mike, and I have set myself up for life. I have now not three, but I bought 4 ones on eBay because they don't sell them anymore. They're old. They're very old, but I love it. I love the feel. I love how it moves because here's the thing. Your screen, your keyboard, your mouse, that's what you're doing all day. It's not just software. That's what your hands are touching. That's what you're moving around with. So you want it to be something that you're comfortable with. Not saying there's another mouse out there that I wouldn't enjoy, but I mean, when you've been using something for how many man hours you put in or how many work hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to make sure whenever another mouse dies, because it is an old mouse, that I'm going to be set up. What's your thoughts?
I feel like we're just beginning to enter a therapy session. I really feel like that's what we're entering right now. Tommy, we have therapy around the mice.
Here's 4. Yeah.
I can't live without it. I have to have the specific one.
5. Yeah.
You know, they're so old, but I can't let them go. And it feels like, so I'm going to not talk about mice per se, but I will talk about just general computer gear stuff. I way overbought on my PC, like my desktop machine. I bought, at the time I bought like the most expensive machine I could afford. Way overbuilt a desktop. It's like super silent. It's made for streaming. I had it custom built from an online retailer, and they had it shipped to my house. So I was very excited about this, big computer thing that I bought. And I've made the opinion here. This is what I do every day. Like if I don't have, I also justified the acquisition of many different laptops just because I didn't want to have one machine go down and not have a backup or two. To your point, Tommy, you're collecting mice. I've collected laptops. I have like an iPad. I have a Surface Book. I have a Surface Pro. Like I have a number of laptops for either traveling and or if something goes down, at least I can, let's just say let's imagine like the internet went out from my house. Well, I'm going to drive somewhere with one of my laptops and go find internet so I can keep doing things, get stuff done. So I have a number of like contingencies and backup plans. And to your point, Tommy, I'm kind of the opinion of if you're going to be doing this, and if I'm going to be, to your point, if I'm going to be spending so many hours of time sitting in my chair in front of this computer with this, I want the keyboard and the mouse to be really nice. I want the screens to be really nice. I want to have plenty of landscape. I don't want to be worrying about like, do I have enough screen real estate? All that kind of stuff. I'm of the opinion, buy good gear, buy what works well for you. And I don't mince on buying high quality computer equipment because that's what I use every day. So I don't buy mice. I actually I'm a wired guy. So here I'm showing my mouse. I'm a gamer mouse. So this is a Razer mouse. I kind of liked the Razer mice, and I intentionally bought it because it was something that had to be wired in the computer. The only thing that I don't have physically wired into my computer is right now is just my headphones. My headphones are wireless, which they've been working pretty well. They're but I also bought really nice headphones. They're like the Apple headphones, so they're not cheap.
Oh yeah.
And then also I have my keyboard, which it's actually a Microsoft keyboard. And I don't really like, I'm going to maybe throw a wrench in your plans here, Tom. I don't like the big programmer key. Yeah, I can't do the
dude. Yeah.
Can't do the lights and the key. I mean, the lights and the keyboard, fine. I don't really care about that. But what I mean, I'm of the opinion if I want to have a laptop that I'm going to move around with, I want the keyboard that I have on my desktop to feel almost exactly like the laptop.
Interesting.
Flat, low, short travel keys. I want to be as equipped. And I made a decision when I was back working at corporate America. I decided that I wasn't even going to use a keyboard when I was at corporate America. I had like a big laptop that we would use and we would drag around because you could move wherever you wanted. You go to meetings, you take your laptop with you. I mean, most companies give you like a laptop to work off of as opposed to an actual desktop machine because you got to go to meetings and all that kind of stuff. Well, I made the decision that I wasn't going to even use a keyboard. I was going to just work all the time on the keyboard that was provided from.
Wow.
That's not probably the most ergonomical decision. But I decided, like, if I'm going to be in a meeting typing notes, I want to be as fast as I possibly can in that meeting, as well as at my desk typing things. I wanted all my time learning well on that keyboard.
Yeah.
And then from now, that's the same mantra I have now is like, I just have to have a keyboard that it matches as closely as possible as the one I'll find on my laptop. That way, whenever I'm traveling, it's the same experience no matter where I go. So yeah, I'm kind of weird about my gear.
Yeah, I mean, dude, what's your monitor setup like? Because you got me into the curved screen. So I look like a Wall Street trader. If you actually saw my side here, I got 2 in front, 3 on the side. It's because again, like I don't want to be working in the 12th hour and going, man, I need to put this window here. I got space because this is what you do.
Yes. So my main screen, or the one I look at the most, is probably I have a 49-inch Samsung. It's the really wide screen one. It's like two 2K screens side by side. So and then I use Power Toys for Windows, and then I can divide the screen into thirds. So basically I can put 3 full browser windows side by side on the main 49-inch screen. And then on the sides, I have 2 27-inch monitors. And then down below the camera, which is beneath here, I actually have another 1080p screen. So it's much lower resolution, but it's exactly the size you would do for like presentations or things like that. So basically the screen underneath my camera is like the presentation screen. When I share screen, that's the one I share. Everything else is not shared. I don't ever share off the other screens. But that way I have multiple windows. So I could technically have 6 browser windows open and a presentation screen all at the same time. So this is maybe one of the reasons why I really like what we're doing with like VS Code. I really like what we're doing with editing in the web. I really like being able to have like lake houses and semantic models and reports kind of all open in separate browser windows. And they kind of all work together. So if I think about like my development cycle for Power BI things or building things in Fabric and in Power BI, I'll have a window entirely because I can do 3 windows side by side. I'll put Fabric and data engineering notebooks and lakehouses on one browser window. I'll have an entirely separate browser window for the semantic model where I need to make measures and refresh the tables and see what new tables come in from the lakehouse. And then I'll have a third window where I start stubbing out what the report looks like. So I actually have 3 separate windows open so I can engineer the data, I can model the data, and then I can build reports on top of the data. And all that's happening kind of like in the same screen, which I think is pretty good. And that's a big difference that we don't get from desktop. We don't get the ability to do
just a lot
other than Power Query and desktop.
Yeah.
I can't really model data well. I mean, I could do data engineering data with Power Query, and then I can have model views open, but I'm continually transitioning to like the report view and then back to the model and then, the relationships. And like, I'm constantly juggling between the different screens. I feel like desktop doesn't give you the ability to do modeling properly and then report building at the same time. You kind of have to pick one or the other.
Listen, the formula bar at this point is a last ditch effort for me now. So anytime I use the formula bar to create a DAX measure, it's because it's
because I can't get the DAX query view. Like that's what it's anymore.
It's the last thing I choose. Like, okay, I guess I have to since yada, yada, yada. So
I would say DAX query view is probably my go-to thing now for building DAX measures. I don't like using the formula bar at all. DAX query view is just second to none. It's the best experience for me. That's awesome. So if I don't have that, I'm stuck. Like I don't love writing formulas in formula bar.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Any other quirkiness around your setup, Tommy? And then we'll go right into the news.
Yeah, let's go into the news because we're already at 10 minutes, and that was fun, by the way. Because today's going to bring us back to our old what's your setup. So, two quick news items that we have here. That again, I'm constantly amazed every week how many blog articles Microsoft the team is coming out with, because this is more than Power BI back in the day, even when they were at their, when the wheels were really turning. So, two ones, and I know you're going to love the first one.
Yeah.
You can now orchestrate your Databricks job with Fabric data pipelines. And
Love it.
this is really neat. It simply adds the Databricks connector or that action to pipelines. Mike, I'm using pipelines more and more.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that to be my default for a lot of just jobs in general. Even if it's a pretty simple, it doesn't have to be a very complicated process I have. I'm turning that into a pipeline. I love the management of that. And I love the visual side of this. And Mike, I'm sure this is going to help you out a lot. I know you do a ton with Databricks.
I do. This is something that's been very much needed. This is one of these, I would argue, a large feature gap between what has been done traditionally with Azure Data Factory and what pipelines should be doing. I mean, this was something that existed in Azure Data Factory for a number of years. I really like using this one. And I would argue a lot of organizations just need or have already built data engineering processes around Databricks. And it's a solid tool. Like I'll argue, like there's a couple, I think, lead tools in this marketplace for like doing data engineering. And I would argue Databricks is right up there at number one. I mean, it's a solid tool. It does what it's got to do. It has great experiences. Whenever I start developing and building notebooks in Spark or in Databricks, I really just get happy with the experience. They've just got it dialed. There's not a lot of friction points. It gets done what you need to get done. It gives me the monitoring I need to understand how much memory or CPU is being used on the machines. The whole experience is just, it feels like it was built by engineers for engineers, really. Like that's what it feels like. So I really like that experience. However, I will say Microsoft Fabric is very quickly becoming a very strong competitor in the Spark space. And the reason I'm saying this is because there's some security things that are kind of neat that come with Fabric that you just kind of get by default with the Spark version that Microsoft gives you. You also get some really good performance improvements. So the native execution engine, which is I would argue is the equivalent to Databricks. They have their own Photon version of like, hey, we're going to accelerate the Spark engine, make it go a little bit faster. The open source version isn't necessarily as efficient as it could be. So Microsoft has come out with their native execution engine that runs other code and actually speeds up your queries. And we're seeing, I mean, in talking with Microsoft and what they've been discovering as well, like this is not just my knowledge, this is my knowledge plus what Microsoft has also been discovering with their customers. They're seeing anywhere between a 4 to 8x improvement in speed on things that are using the native execution engine. So, I mean, I just did a post with them. We just did a whole kind of performance optimization updates. It's getting easier. There's a ton of settings you can adjust, but Microsoft is kind of picking the best ones to put together for read optimized or write optimized lakehouse tables. There's a lot of things in there. So anyways, I really like this experience. This is a winner for me. The documentation is in the chat window here as well. So I definitely want to recommend you go read up on this one. If you use Databricks, I'm certain you will love this activity. And I've actually been of the opinion, I don't really like Databricks', they have like this scheduler system that can schedule jobs. I don't really like it. I don't like the scheduling that happens from Databricks. It's not graphical enough. It doesn't seem to do that's one area of Databricks that I feel is a bit weaker than what I would say in pipelines inside either Azure Data Factory or pipelines in Fabric. I really like using a pipeline to copy data into the lake and then kick off the job in the Databricks notebook or notebooks, whatever those things are, run the job, complete the job, and then go back over to the pipeline and let the pipeline finish like, hey, do some extra things, refresh the semantic model. There's some other things that are going on as well. So I really do think like the pipeline is the right place to do the orchestration of things and sequencing things together. I think it's really strong.
Dude, I love it. I love it. So that's a wonderful update. Another one that I think is going to be something I am going to be talking about a lot more on the podcast is we now have for Fabric Data Agents a way to use Python. And there's a Python SDK, simply a Python package called Fabric Data Agent SDK. And this simply allows us to program, manage, and since create any of your data agents using Python. Mike, there are some things I think that are just better with code. We're finding this with notebooks, but I know there's a UI for everything in Fabric. The data agents to me seems like it was made for a Python package or a Python script. And to me, this is a no-brainer. I can't wait to dive into this. Again, to get a little dive into this, really what we can do with this Python package is create or connect to a data agent, add your lakehouse, select the tables, put the evaluation queries and what your answers should be. So this is super common in the prompting world. This is what you call a few shot prompt, where we're simply saying, here's the question, expect an answer. You give enough of those, that agent, or in the sense that instructions understands, oh, this type of question should get this type of answer. And that's what we're doing with the data agent on our own data. Again, you could do this in the UI. I think you're just going to be much more efficient using code here. It just makes more sense.
Well, the one thing that I think is missing in data agents, right? There's no UI to do a couple of these prepping steps, right? Like, for example, when you look at the example in the code of the blog post here, what they're doing is they're actually saying, once you install, so this is not about creating the data agent, I'm assuming. Again, I'm just trying to read into the article just now as you sent it, Tommy. What I understand is this is a data agent that may already exist, or you have somewhere inside your Fabric where you've created one, right? Yeah. So there are some things like, hey, here's some pre-prompting, here's some information I want the agent to have before I talk to it. But this is kind of still enhancing that, where you could send it some, you're picking the name of the agent. So again, it exists. And then it's doing the create data agent on behalf here in this step. So this is what I don't quite understand in this script. Is it creating the agent in this Python script and then you're prepping it, or you're setting the settings with it, or am I using an existing data agent? That's where I'm kind of a little bit gray on in this article. But that being said, though, I have been starting to play with data agents. They're interesting. I'm not sure if I have yet found a great solid use case for them yet. I'm still trying to figure out where I can apply them appropriately. I think maybe the pairing here is between like a data agent and like a user defined function or user data function, because then you could send information from your semantic model to the user data function. Yeah. User data functions are written in Python. The data agent can be installed, and then maybe you can run the data agent inside that Python script and return results back to the user. So something is there. I'm not sure exactly what's there yet, but I think, again, this is one area where I think they're giving you the tooling. The community's got to figure out the best way to use it.
I think the gap's going to be when we can actually use this with Copilot Studio, right? Because this is all in the Fabric environment, including the data agent right now, unless you build that custom application. Why don't we have a UI in Copilot Studio? And this is, again, Copilot Studio, the Microsoft tool, not just Fabric, that allows me to create my agents, allows me to create every connector, but we don't have one for Fabric yet, because that would allow me in Office 365 and any tooling to connect to this agent, which would be already pre-set up, that would be connected to my data. So I think that to me is where the gap is. The data agent is really that first step, though. You do need that, but you're right. I don't think we have the consumer face for what it's actually going to look like yet, or fully fleshed out.
Yeah, I think it's gonna need a little bit of time to kind of get refined there a bit and to see how it would. But it's promising. Regardless, it seems to be promising. I like what they're going with this thing, and the fact that you can like bolt on these things. If I think about other experiences where I've started to play with large language models, one of them that's been interesting to me has been just kind of playing around with GitHub's models. There's actually a GitHub model marketplace or a GitHub model store where you can try models for free and send it prompts and pre-prompt it and all kinds of things to figure out how would this thing be used to inside your application or whatever you want to build. So I still think I'm shifting my mindset. I still think I'm in this whole world of like, I still think everything is like an API. And I think I have to adjust my thinking a little bit, because programming is shifting away from writing a code language like Python, and it's more shifting to just writing English or writing words or your language to the model. And in the same way you would program the computer to do something with code, there's a lot of learning like tutorials. People are really trying to say, to get better results out of your prompts, do it this way.
Yeah.
Set these requirements. And so I'm finding my prompts are getting like larger and longer with more descriptive things of what I want it to do and what I want it not to do. And that is improving my results as it comes out.
And again, the big part of that is you can use an agent right away, or if you're using VS Code or whatever tool you're using. That being said, the setup can really enhance or be that marginal difference on what your actual output is. Could I start using this, type 2 sentences, get an result? Yeah. But how good is that result going to be? And you may be satisfied with that, but I think you're touching 20% of what's possible.
Yeah, I think there's again to the same effect. We've been saying this for a number of months now, Tommy. Like, working with agents and large language models is a lot like how we had to learn how to work with Google. Like, we didn't know how to write things yet. We didn't know what to prompt with. I'm now starting to finally see collections of prompts being stored on GitHub and in other experiences. And now people are building apps that are, hey, try out these kind of prompts. And like, so you can see what other people are programming the AI with, and you can use those and start from them, then adjust them as you need to what your needs are going to be doing. So there's something else here. There's a whole space of, I need to have a collection of prompts that we can pull from and then adjust as necessary.
I think that's a really good transition, Mike, as we dive into a very more focused developer-based kind of tooling. Today, Mike, we're talking about TMDL, the tabular model definition language, I believe.
Yes.
And
And
if I'm not mistaken, and we're talking about that not just in Power BI, but again, kind of I think the intention for it was to be in a code IDE or interface definition, or I don't even know what IDE stands for, but I like VS Code or Cursor or something like that, where I can, in a sense, open source, see all the files in there, and I have a project-based things. Now, I'm curious for those listening, because I'm sure we're going to dive into two things here: heavy developer things and heavy AI things. We talk about AI a lot, and I don't want to be an AI podcast, but Mike, I'm going to just start off here saying, I think we're at the point now with being in the BI space where this is just going to be part of our life. And if you're not on board, to me, and not to be a hot take, someone who can do it is going to be better than you, kind of thing, no matter what your skill is. So I think that's why we talk about it a lot. I just want to make that PSA out here on our Power BI podcast.
Okay, I'm with
So
that.
just want to make sure. So Mike, let's dive into TMDL and using it, I think, in its intended application. By the way, integrated development experience. That's IDE. And
there you go.
Let's start. Thank you, Mike. So
I knew it would come back to you.
Definitely sent that in the chat. That was not an AI in the brain kind of thing. That was manual information. Let's dive into this in VS Code. And again, Mike, everything about TMDL screams that this was for a developer, or screams that was for VS Code. What's your experience when TMDL first came out and using TMDL, your first impression of it? And we'll dive in that way.
Yeah, let me maybe give you a bit more history on how I've come to understand what TMDL is doing and how do I have kind of unpacked it. So let's give credit to where credit is due. TMDL is a version, it's an abstraction of TMSL as TS tabular model semantic language, TMSL, right? I'm trying to get the language right.
Isn't that straight JSON too?
There's a tabular model semantic language, and this is the .bim file. So whenever you would build a semantic model on analysis services, you get this thing called the BIM file. And the BIM file was the full definition of the model, all the tables, all the columns, the version of the model, everything that the computer analysis services needed to understand about how to build the schema around tables and relationships and all the measures. All that was contained in a single JSON file, which great, worked really well, but it was very difficult for people to read it.
Computers great, humans bad.
Computers was great. The other thing here too was, when you look at the model.bim, there's a lot of components to it, right? There was things like down to the measures, down to the tables, a partition strategy, all the things that you would normally experience inside desktop. Basically every button you could click or touch inside desktop, and there's other features that were there as well. None of those existed inside like other than just one big file.
Right.
So the challenge, I think, approach from this was Matthias Tierbach was the gentleman who kind of came up with, there's got to be a better way to check in and check out. How do we check this into code? How do we have multiple people working on something? Like, Tommy, you want to work on one table, the sales fact table. I need to work on a different table, the operations fact table. How do we merge our changes together? And when you look at like GitHub or how Git works, having one monolithic large file is not really ideal, because anytime you change something, Tommy, everything gets like in a weird order, and like things are out of order. Like you could have hundreds of lines of code being changed, but all you did was add a little bit of code in one section. And what happens is the JSON structure just kind of rearranges, like it resorts itself. So then you could get lots of code changes that don't really indicate actual changes. It's not really helpful. So I think Matthias did a good job of just saying, let's step back and let's solve this problem. And what Matthias had been doing for a number of years before we got to TMDL is he had built PBI tools, which is a tool that would actually go into a PBIX file and unpack it. It would unzip the file. It would open up all the TMDL, the TMDL formatted items, and it would just make a bunch of series of files. It would have one file per table. It had files per schemas. It has files per the definition of the model. It has files for perspectives. All the things you would have as individual objects. Matthias was able to come in and break them out into individual files. Okay, so why was this important? Why was this so revolutionary? The reason is now a single object could be compiled into the BIM, but then broken apart into all these little tiny components. And I think you saw something like this very similarly show up inside DAX Studio. I think DAX Studio had something similar to this, maybe. I'm not quite sure. Maybe. Oh, I'm thinking of Tabular Editor. Tabular Editor had a very similar approach. Wasn't implemented the same way. It was JSON files, but they're all broken apart into small pieces.
Yeah.
Again, thinking about how do you version control this monolithic model into all its different tiny components. So that's my understanding. So just be aware. I'm coming into TMDL with this mindset of we had a single monolithic file. It was very difficult to manage.
It was JSON
versions of it,
too, so quotations
and it was
and syntax.
all JSON.
It was
yes.
Human. You could really. It was near impossible to get it right from a human point of view because every DAX measure had quotations around it. So if you had a complicated DAX measure,
correct,
you have backslashes and single quotes just to try to manage that, which is very difficult for a human to do and to make sure that you have the syntax correct, much less trying to edit anything.
So that, I think, was the initial starting point of where we came from. And again, all this was being built in the cloud. It was all computer based. And so it was no problem. It was not a big issue.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happened here was we were trying to figure out a way of like how tools that literally the tools that work with Power BI they were evolving. They were evolving faster than Microsoft was. And so Matthias kind of made the proposal like, here, I'd like to pitch this idea back to Microsoft. And Microsoft said, this is a great idea. And they had their smartest, best brains in the DAX world looking at what Matthias was building. Matthias came up with this, how to comment things, how to add, make it easy to read. There's also this idea of like, when you make these files in TMDL, not only is it humanly readable, it's more like a YAML-like structure. So all of the brackets and the quotes and the arrays just kind of taken care of. It's not as difficult. The indenting is very important. Like Python, you have to indent very well in order for it to read the code. But now the TMDL format is actually much easier for us to read and use. And so now this is a great blend between working with writing code and actually using it inside the semantic models. So TMDL isn't what runs desktop. Actually, the TMSL, TMSL, still runs the models. It's still what's compiled. But you take the TMDL and you compile it down into TMSL, and then desktop and all the other programs use that format, even though you can see it in this other format.
Should be noted too, if you're using Git integration at all, you're going to get 2 folders for every or for each artifact, the report and the semantic model. And it's pretty easy for that to get integrated. You do need to have the preview feature, I believe, still, Mike, to show TMDL in desktop. If you create a project, you get straight TMDL. And that is really where the Git integration comes from.
Yes. And just to be very clear too, like with this new TMDL format, if you use PBI tools, you can actually create a TMDL model diagram only. And now you can actually just publish just the model. So one thing that we had, like when you work in Power BI Desktop typically works with the model and a report page. You always get kind of two pairing pieces together. There's always been this need, I think, just to have just the model. Like, I don't really care what the pages are. Just talk directly to the model. I don't need any pages. And now we're getting like live edit mode now with models that are in the service. So we actually now have the ability for us to then use desktop as the authoring tool directly to the service. But then we don't get any report pages. There's nothing reporting. It's just all model level things. So I really like this. I like this approach. So that's kind of my background and understanding of what TMDL is. I think to me, it's like the de facto standard that I want to work with now moving with models. Like I don't really want to work with any other older legacy stuff. I only want to work in TMDL because it's just so much easier to read, write, adjust. And then here, I think, Tommy, is where we're going to go in the conversation today is, okay, well, we have this new format. We can pull out this format and use it in various forms, either on GitHub, publishing things through Git directly to workspaces. We can synchronize the workspace between Git and the workspace. But now we actually have the ability of using this TMDL format in VS Code. There's actually a VS Code extension for TMDL from Microsoft. And that allows us to use GitHub Copilot. And I think James in the chat here, rightfully so, the TMDL format plus using VS Code plus using GitHub Copilot is quite impressive. You really can tell it to do a lot. And now there's agent mode with VS Code. So agent mode lets you do things to the files. Go ahead, Tommy.
So let's go quickly into the extension because this is really important. If you're going to use VS Code in a Power BI project, you really, the VS Code extension is really kind of a requirement. Because not just it does the syntax and actually shows you and highlights things, but it's also going to show you if you have any syntax errors, a wrong indentation, a naming convention wrong. So it will let you know before you save it. By the way, here's a warning. Here's an error. And so just alone with the VS Code extension, you have kind of that check to make sure like, okay, what's going on? Add this with source control. Now I can see, okay, oh, Mike, he actually changed the definition of this measure. And this is what he updated and added. And I can see the changes here. Now, again, we are diving, and again, that PSA here, we are diving into heavier developer things. I don't know if I would call this citizen developer, Mike. I don't know if I would call this self-service. And it's really hard for me to make that case. So I think we're talking about the pros here and really people who are just diving into this. That being said, if you have not touched this stuff yet and you are full-time Power BI and you love what you're doing, I highly encourage you to get started with this because this is going to be, to me, more or less the de facto way. And that's kind of the intention of this. So just want to put that out there in case you haven't touched any of this yet. And
I'm going to echo what you're saying there. I'm going to echo a lot. This is not a first-time new user of Power BI. This is pro users. This is people who have been doing this for a while. And you're looking to build lots of things quickly. Like that's just kind of where I'm going with this one.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think, like I said, if you haven't touched it yet, I'm going to highly encourage and push you to that. So, all right, so let's dive in. Mike, there's a ton of things that this opens up for us with VS Code, because again, VS Code, this amazing heavy developer-based tool, but again, now it actually makes sense for Power BI because TMDL was made for VS Code. They are one and the same. So where do you want to dive in first with this on some of the use cases you've seen, some of the best practices?
We can just start there. I mean, that's fine. Let's start with some of those. What are some of the best? Where are you finding value from this? Tell me what things are you doing with it that is adding value to you?
So I'm gonna hold off on the AI stuff right off the bat, even though I think that's the meat of this. But for me, Mike, just the changes and going through, like, for example, you just already gave the example. I wanted to create a model. I didn't need the report, but I wanted to kind of recreate it. So my ability to quickly update or delete a folder, the report, report.report folder. And so now I just have this model that I can just change the definition. I can go through and just rename things too. So I think the renaming ability, I changed the table name. I'm like, oh, well, that table's touched all these measures, which is not good because everything's not going to understand this new table name. That's always very frustrating from the report side, right? Where if you change the definition, well, you know that the report's going to show errors because it's looking for the old table name. Well, guess what? Find and replace is your friend. And all you have to do is just go through. I'm like, I'm going to rename every report visual that touches this table or measure or column with this new name. And guess what? Everything's changed. Because again, the beauty of TMDL in the project folder, I should say, is you have two different folders. I have the semantic folder, which is all, to your point, the schema, relationships, DAX, tables. And I have a report folder, which is my theme, all my pages, every visual, where the properties of this, and it's nicely laid out. So if I need to change a definition, I don't have to go through an open desktop. I can do this in 10 seconds with find and replace. So to me, I've surprisingly used that more than I thought I was going to. And that's kind of been a very default thing that has been a near and dear to me.
Yeah, so I think those are solid use cases here. I think the other things I'm looking at, so there's some things. So let's be clear about what's happening inside the file in general. There's nothing like in these TMDL like files. There's this is the entirety of the semantic model. Everything is here. The whole model lives in these series of files. Everything you can do from a model experience is incorporated into these files. The reason I bring this up is because there are some experiences in Power BI Desktop you cannot manage. One of them being perspectives. So there are times where you build applications, you may use perspectives for different things. A perspective allows you to take, it's basically it's like a catered custom or groomed custom view of like the semantic model, right? I have a lot of fact tables, I have a lot of dimensions, and I may, not every dimension works with every measure per se. So what you may want to do is you may want to build a perspective that limits the number of columns you can see. And this is used in various aspects of the tools. So if you connect to semantic models using third-party tooling, you could connect to a model and pick the perspective you care about. And then that can resolve measures and columns back to you that are actually used in that perspective. So perspectives, I think, are a very useful experience here. And I would argue having things like perspectives available to us, this just opens up everything. So and this also, I think, unblocks us for, let's say Microsoft wants to add XYZ new features to a semantic model. No problem. Already supported. It's by default supported in the TMDL format. So, to me, every time the semantic model gets an update, there's something new, there's new features. No matter what Microsoft does, the TMDL format will always be supporting it. Yeah. And this is very valuable to me because now I don't have to be reliant on desktop. Again, desktop's been around since 2015, and we've never been able to edit perspectives inside desktop, right? And we still can't do it. I mean, you can see them. You can observe that they're there, but you can't create them or manage them. So like, there's not, and I don't think, honestly, there's not enough use case for Microsoft to say, look, we're going to let you manage the perspectives inside the model. We're just not going to let you do it. Another area where you'd use perspectives is when you want to customize a visual. So you need a perspective when you're doing personalized visuals. You can specify what columns should be used on that visual.
Which today is still the only place in the Power BI service you can use a perspective.
Yes. And I think there should be more places where perspectives are used. I think it's actually a really useful thing. But again, this is where I'm looking at this going, okay, there's things inside the semantic model I may want to use or do that are above and beyond the standard desktop experience. And again, now we're clearly in the pro developer space already. And this is why we need to be doing this kind of stuff. So anyways, all that to say is I think this is really useful.
How have you been using it with perspectives, creating them?
We built a tool actually. So we have a third-party tool for helping customers embed products. So we have a product called Intelexos, Intel External. And in our product, we actually let users build perspectives. And not only do we let you connect to a semantic model using this embedded experience, we actually have a custom table building experience. Build your own custom tables and export millions of rows of data using our tool. And in doing that, we allow users to pull a perspective. The semantic model is the input to building these really rich tables. And then what we do is we automatically build you a paginated report. Right. And then you have a limited amount of columns that can then help you specify a limited amount of data elements that are going in and out of these reports. So there's a whole bunch of, again, when you think about extending the experience of like semantic models, I think of the semantic model as like the core capability we have here. Semantic models are amazing. What we're seeing now is a proliferation of not just building reports, right? Reports is like one tool that you can use to build on like data on top of the semantic model, but you have metric sets. You now have explorations. You now have all these different paginated reports, right? Those are just 3 separate tools in addition to just building a Power BI report.
Yeah. So let's go back.
Why doesn't more exist?
Yeah. Let's go back to TMDL here. Have you been using, does your tool or what you've been using with Perspective, you've been going straight to TMDL with this?
So when we make perspectives, we do them with TMDL and we start there. That's what we've been using for the perspective creation. It's just easier to build stuff that way. It's not that difficult. So that's what we're using there. There's other things too. If you'll see like other tools such as Bravo, Bravo is built by SQL BI. Bravo will make these things called annotations. Annotations are other properties, options, whatever you want. Those are options that exist inside a column or a measure. And in SQL BI's world, if they add a date table for you, they'll note this is the date table, and the annotation drives the name of that date table. And that way, as if you add other DAX patterns onto the semantic model, the reason they do that is that way the date table is named the same way in every single semantic model that Bravo touches. And that way, if you're doing time intelligence or other things as well, SQL BI has a guarantee of like, oh, if we find this date table, one that was made by SQL BI, we can have assurance that this is built correctly, and we can build all of our time intelligent measures off of that. There's a whole way of like automation and programming and making things easier that live under this thing called annotations, but no one even touches, but you can only see them really inside the semantic model. That's another area that's really interesting as well.
You know, it's funny with this coding language, and some people may be asking here, do I need to learn the TMDL language? One, it's pretty easy, but honestly too, Mike, I'm going to confess something here about my developer-based lifestyle now. I'm not really developing a lot, like in terms of actually writing the code, especially the last 2 months, I would say, because I've been using the Copilot. I've been using agents and copilots in VS Code, and the amount of code I've written is very extensive. These extensions for some local applications, ton of Python scripts, ton of TMDL. But Mike, I actually haven't wrote a lot. So I think this is a really good time to dive into, if you're going to get the most out of TMDL and VS Code, you really need to invest your time into Copilot. Can you do a lot and be really happy without using AI? Sure. That being said, you're missing out. That's like you bought a 12-inch TV and you got cable. I can watch the baseball game. But guess what? 75-inch TVs are pretty cheap these days, and it enhances your experience. So I want to dive into this because to me, this has blown me away. It has absolutely changed my experience on what I can accomplish and how much I can accomplish in a given time period. One, there are things I can't do without this. And then 2, the things I can do, I can just do it so much faster. And this starts with this agent idea. So yes, I can do Copilot off a page. And that's kind of what people think right now, Copilot, where I'm going to select code. I want this edit. But now VS Code, and I personally use Cursor. It's a little farther ahead of where VS Code is. That being said, either one are great. But they both have this concept of an agent, or more importantly, this custom instructions. So what I would do, and this is what I have in all of my workspaces and my projects, I can have this down to the workspace level or even to the folder level. In Cursor, it's .cursor is a folder, and then underneath that is a folder called rules. In VS Code, it's Copilot and custom instructions. And I simply write what I want the agent or Copilot to know before doing anything in this file or this workspace, this repo, so to speak. For example, for me, I write a few things out. I write its objective. I write its target or the intention. So like who it is, what it's good at. So, you're an expert at TMDL, Power BI, yada, 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 you're a developer. I write the objective. Here's what you're going to be focusing on. Mm-hmm. Something that I do too, because with agents, they have this ability to just start editing everything. Mm-hmm. I usually stay away from that, where I say, before writing anything, before editing a code, here's a folder called log, the log folder. I want you to write what your intention is and how you're going to accomplish it. I will then approve of whatever edit you're going to do. So I'll give you a really good example. And I actually went through this with Ginger Grant. I wanted to add for a semantic model really good descriptions across every measure in a given semantic model. But I didn't want this measure divides this measure by this measure, right?
Yes.
I kind of wanted to be a little more creative. Mm-hmm. So I had this agent that what his job was, and I wanted to write basically write the log folder. Then we open up Copilot. I can actually then call it an agent so it can start editing without even me approving. And what I actually wrote to it is, I want you to write for every measure, because it already understands TMDL. Other cool thing, I can feed the agent the documentation for Microsoft of TMDL. So syntax, because TMDL's kind of new. So I give it all the documentation so it knows, okay, you are a TMDL expert now. I want you to add these descriptions. I want them to be business-led descriptions. I don't want these to just be simple mathematical, like, hey, we're dividing this by this. This has a standard deviation. No, I want you to think of something creative here. Mm-hmm. It wrote a log file and it said, how are you going to tackle this? I can edit that file and say, no, this is too basic, or however I want to modify that. We send that back to the agent. It begins its work. Mike, in about 15 seconds, over 35 measures, we're done. We're done. Yep. And the descriptions were very descriptive. I can then go through and go across other semantic models. I also, because of context, Mike, I fed it the report, and the report folder. I said, I want you to look at these measures. Tell me where they're being used and help that aid you in how you write the descriptions. Mm-hmm. So if I'm using this description in KPI cards, then I want you to note that. And that is something that we've never had the ability to do with any tool. So I'm just going to start there. And I really mean, I'm just starting there. I'm getting pumped up. But Mike, have you used this? What do you think of this?
I think this is, it's this kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of so if you think about like the model and the report and how they're related together, right? There should also be things where you could say, look, this is the name of a column. Where is this column used inside the report? And it should be able to pull through all the visuals, read each page of the report and say, here's where I found. I mean, you could also do a find and search of that as well. But like you kind of want to be able to talk to it and say, get a summary of this stuff. And if you think about this too, the fact that we have a semantic model and then potentially multiple thin reports that all can be defined by this TMDL simplified experience, you could really build some really interesting collections of information between get all your reports. Here's the model, link this together. And you could define way more complicated things and let the agent search, find, build, create additional things here and give you a better summary of what's coming out and how models and reports are linked together. So there's a lot of extra things you can do here. And also, to your point, Tommy, if you have a report with some visuals and measures used in them, why wouldn't you explain where those measures are used, right? There are some measures that are purely visual based only. There are measures that are going to live only in the thin report. We're now going to be able to build visuals with DAX calculations in them. So there's the visual calculations, visual calcs. Visual calcs buries the DAX directly inside that visual. Where does that live? How many of those do we have? Like, this is where you can start pulling down the models and start talking to Copilot inside VS Code. I can see all the code together. It can read everything. You can specify this is a visual calc. Find all the places where we have visual calcs in the model. I think the large language models are going to continually get better and better. And it's going to be a shaping thing between me, the user. I'm going to learn how to write better to the model. And the models will be able to understand and read better what's going on. So to your point, Tommy, I think it's going to be something where the community needs to start stepping up here a bit more and giving some good examples of prompts that are working for them, because there's not a lot of good examples that I can start from.
I think, you have all your repos for like, you have one for Tableau editor, you have one for the visual one. I think we need a repo on Power BI tips for instructions.
Done.
Honestly. And you'll have 90% for me. Let me do one that's going to blow your mind, because the community, this one to me, the description one's nice. It's cool. But here's the one that literally has been the holy grail for Power BI, the Power BI community, up until what I'm about to say. And not to be too hefty on this, but how many tools have been out there, and people have worked so hard on external tools or extensions that try to basically do a measure or your semantic model, what's being used, what can I eliminate from this model? And a lot of times I know MK Friedman had one. I think you have one on the business ops, where it's just trying to eliminate or evaluate what measures, columns, or tables are being used in the model and in the report. But this has almost been impossible to do up until now, because I can see like maybe what dependencies are on a measure, but then it's really hard, especially with an external tool, because it only touches the semantic model, to see what's touching a visual in the report, whether it's a filter or on a visual. So we've never really had this true ability to say, what can I actually eliminate, both columns, tables, and measures from my semantic model, because I'm not using it anywhere. Enter Copilot.
Exactly.
I have these instructions, and I can I can allow it to do it for me, but we have custom instructions where it's like, hey, I want you to go through this entire semantic model, see if it's being used at all in any dependencies, in something that's a business logic, or in a visual or a filter. Write to me a log file that defines this. Write to me all the ones that are not being used at all, the only ones that are used maybe for a filter. Maybe I can eliminate this, and I can categorize these things. I can then actually ask it to eliminate them for me. Just delete it. I don't have to open up Power BI desktop. The agent can take care of this for me. But for the very first time in 10 years, or gosh, we're at almost the 10-year mark now. For the very first time, we have this ability that, again, we've been searching for, that I can accomplish in maybe 30 seconds. It's not even enough time for me to get coffee. And this is the one that's been blowing me away, because, again, we have so many tools out there that can accomplish some of it, but not all of it. And you had to open up, a PowerShell script or to do something else. I can't even get coffee, and I can find a very complicated model, find everything that has not been touched.
So we're almost at time here, Tommy. We've been talking about this a lot. I agree with you, Tommy. I want to take your comment, and I want to kind of shift the mindset here just slightly. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about large language models in general and what I've been blown away by them. Let me just say that. I'll just start with saying I'm flabbergasted by how well they work and how efficient they can do certain things. Now, you do need to know enough about what it's writing so you can kind of verify that it's right or it's working, or is it efficient, is it not efficient. But my perspective, my mental model here is these models are being trained on every bit of SQL code, every bit of Python code, every bit of programming code, all of the React. I could never learn as much code as these things have been absorbing, period. I just couldn't. It's physically not possible.
Right.
Even if I just read all the code that it was learning on top of, I would never even be able to read it all, let alone comprehend everything that was going on. So the knowledge that it has around programming and things is just astronomical. And the reason I'm going to pull this back up here, Microsoft had this really good stance of, hey, we realize that everyone needs to build apps. Apps is going to be where it's at. And so Microsoft built Power Apps. Power Apps is this really rich, it's like a user interface. It's kind of codey, but not really. You can drag and drop some low codes, experiences. Since large language models have come out, there has been no talk of low code, no code solutions anymore. So I think what's happening here is Microsoft had the right vision for the world needs hundreds or thousands or millions of more apps to be built by people. There's going to be a bunch of creative ideas, solving problems, integration of things. Like there's a whole bunch of apps that can solve problems, real world problems. But the challenge I think I'm finding here is not challenge. The shift I'm seeing now is we're now adjusting our reference point, right? So before I had to go to this Power Apps thing and generate apps there. Well, now I can go directly to the large language model and send it an image, draw it out in a wireframe and say, here's the screens of my app that I want you to build. And here's the images I want you to use all across your different places. So you can now step in to this new world. And so, yes, Microsoft was 100% right. There's going to be a proliferation of many, many applications being built very quickly. Their implementation of Power Apps was wrong. It wasn't Power Apps driving this. It was large language models. That's what's driving this. So I really think like Microsoft had the right vision, but they had the wrong tooling. And no one could, I think, foresee that large language models are going to come in and build full apps like with a couple prompts. Like that's just not like a thing. But what I'm seeing right now is I'm teaching my son how to write and build programs this summer. We're going to do like a little, summer studies class here, and I'm going to have him read and learn about programming. We got a bunch of like MIT free offered programs that we're going to run him through. He's going to learn how to do Python. And then in conjunction with this, I'm going to teach him how to use large language models in concert with whatever you're programming. So we have this whole kind of like, summer class thing kind of figured out for him, where he and I are going to kind of work together and build out apps, applications, things using large language models to help him understand like how to write code and how to use AI in concert with writing the code. So not only do you have to understand the code and what's being built there, but like if you just understand divs and structures and flex boxes, like if you just understand how the website is built, you can kind of in your mind rebuild that in a way and then use large language models to prompt and change and do things there as well. So it's really interesting to see where this is going. And I think these large language models are going to greatly shift how people are actually going to be using Power BI, Fabric, VS Code in the future. And we're going to get a lot more experiences. Why not prompt a large language model and say, hey, build me a semantic model, and here's the things I need in it. And here's my data sources. It should be able to do that for you at some point.
And I think that a lot of people, if you're just getting started, Mike, to your point, Power Apps, I mean, it made a lot of sense at the time. I just read it. 40% of Fortune 500 companies are limiting their investment on in-house application development. And they're just increasing that because we're seeing that. I think for a lot of us today, and I don't want to say for every industry, but I think especially the one we're in. I mean, listen, you see the prolific tooling Microsoft's doing around Fabric and Code. Fabric is for everyone, but at the same time, it is heavy developer. So there's a bit of an embrace.
But code isn't scary when you have a large language model to explain it to you. Code isn't scary. Like you don't have to be a Python expert to write a user data function anymore. Like all the things that were really scary before are not that scary anymore.
I wish when I started the Python, though, there was a large language model. But at the same time, I think the foundation of just reading manually, learning manually, if that was the thing, was a big help. But I think for a lot of us too, there's a bit of an embrace here, regardless if you're doing VS Code and TMDL or you're doing DAX, where it's not, people have the wrong idea about AI and agents that it does everything for you, right? Where you just sit back, write 3 words, and you don't do anything. There is a skill here. And I think you pointed that out as well. There is a skill around prompting. There is a skill around having these agents on getting the right results, but being the most proficient with this. And I think for a lot of us too, we have to embrace that. That is the Venn diagram of BI tooling. You have BI and engineering. You have BI and visual. To me, you have BI and AI as another part of that Venn diagram of skills, where we just, a lot of us just need to embrace it. And I mean, my arms are open. I know yours are too, but it's just been amazing what I've seen just with TMDL and VS Code here on what's possible.
Yes. And there's a lot of really interesting programs out here. So one of the things, just as a point of reference of what I use when I'm doing Copilot, I pay for GitHub Copilot to use that. But with that, I can use agent mode, which I've turned on. It's a setting you have to turn on inside VS Code. And then with that, when you pay for the experience of that Copilot experience, you have like Claude 3.5 Sonnet, you have Claude 3.7, you have Gemini 2.5 Pro, that's the Google's version. Then there's OpenAI GPT 4.1, 4.0, and then 0.4 Mini. And I believe you can also bolt that onto any large language models that are coming out of Azure. So if you have an Azure Studio large language model you want to leverage part of your integration, you can just give it the API keys and then it can talk directly to that API and get the information out. So one thing I haven't quite figured out how to do yet, I didn't want to pay for it, but I pay for their premium X, but Grok is in there, but apparently you have to pay extra for Grok AI to be an API call. So that's one thing I would like to kind of try out Grok as well and see how well it writes code on things. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things coming out here. And again, all I'll say is there are certain features or things that have happened in the tech space that just impress me. This is one that has been very impressive. And I feel like this is the same moment I'm having when I saw Power BI and Power Query show up. Power BI and Power Query came out. There was like to me, there was like a learning elbow that needed to happen. Like there was like, wow, I'm like, this will impact and change things. I can see how Power Query and Power BI will physically change how businesses do business. And I'm now looking at vibe coding and AI and our large language models, and I'm seeing there's another inflection point I'm seeing here. And this is making programming and code much more accessible to many more people. 100%. And that's really exciting to me. So I'm actually very aggressively trying to learn as fast as I can, do a lot of projects, get my head around how this stuff works and how can I best utilize these prompts as well. All right. I think we are definitely at time. Good topic today. I will say very clearly, there is a GitHub page now. So if you do have any large language model prompts,
that's awesome. The
code repo is available. It is public. You can go look at it today. There is no large language prompts there already. So Tommy, go ahead and fire it up. Go find some stuff.
I see it.
I'm going to task Tommy today with throwing down at least one or two initial prompts that you're using, Tommy, out there on GitHub. And so that way we can go check them out and see what the prompts look like. Yeah. So there we go. All that being said, thank you so much for all of your time today. Everyone listening to the podcast, we hope that you found some value with us unpacking here VS Code, TMDL, a little bit of history around TMDL and how we're using it, and where we're actually seeing large language models assisting or aiding us in developing our semantic models. I think this is going to be very useful moving forward. So that being said, if you like this episode, if you thought this was useful for some thought-provoking concepts, please recommend it to somebody else. Let somebody else know you found this valuable and useful, because we just do this for free and for fun. We need to get the word out there. More people need to hear about what we're doing. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Share with a colleague or a friend or online. We do this for free. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to Power BI Tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
All right. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.